بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد. So أنواع المشروعات. So we had the مشروعات, we had the أوامر, we had the نواهي. Now each of these can be categorized into two categories. One is called عزيمة, and one is called رخصة. We look at each of these individually inshallah. What is the مشروعات? المشروعات على نوعين. The مشروعات are how many categories? Two categories. عزيمة and رخصة. And each one of these will go through individually. So the awamir and the nawahi. Both of these have what? Can be categorized as the azima or the rukhsa. So for example, look, what's azima mean? Azama ya'zimu. To make a what? Al-qasdul mu'akkad. A firm intention is known as al-azmu. In azamut talaq, if you make a firm intention to give talaq. Similarly, لا يؤاخذ ما عقدتم الأيمان. Yes? So azima is what? القصد المؤكد. And شرعا ما لزمنا من الأحكام ابتداءً. The original or the default. The original or the default ruling is called what? Azima. Okay? So for example, the Salatul Jama'ah, Salatul Fajr Ma'al Jama'ah, that's the original default. وأقسامها ما ذكرنا من الفرض والواجب والنهي yes والحرام. So the default is this is you have to do it. If you don't do it, it's sinful. Those are all the default. That's azima. So however the rulings were initially laid down by the Sharia. However, the rulings were laid down by the Sharia. These are called the azaim. Are you following? And we understand this better when we compare it to the next one. What's the next one? The rukhsa. What does rukhsa mean? Al-yusru was-suhula. Ease and suhula similar meaning ease. وَشَرْعًا صَرْفُ الْأَمْرِ أَنْ يُسْرٍ إِلَى يُسْرٍ. And from a Shari'i perspective, it means to divert a ruling or to move a ruling away from usr to yusr. From usr to yusr. Are you following? So it was some difficulty to ease. To make it, there's a ruling which is originally what? Difficult or harder, and it make it easier. It's called what? Rukhsa. Are you following? And this is two types. Rukhsa how many times? Two types of rukhsa. What are two types of rukhsa? Number one. Al-awwalu rukhsatul fa'li ma'a baqa'il hurma. You have the action, and you're allowed to do the action even though the action has remained haram. Do you understand what's happening here? So rukhsa is actually a rukhsa. This action has remained haram. But the Sharia has said that due to extraordinary circumstances, despite it being haram, what happens now? You're allowed to do this and there will be no sin upon you. Are you following? For example, somebody's put a gun to your head. Or somebody threatened you in a way that one of your body parts, meaning like a real threat, not like you get bullied or they tease you, but like you could actually lose a body part. You could actually get like body part is like a way of explaining like severe bodily harm. You could really get severe bodily harm. What happens now? So al-ikra' ala ijra'i kalimatul kufri ala lisan. So what? If somebody puts a gun to his head, if you don't say something bad about Islam, if you don't denounce Islam, if you don't say something about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la qaddar Allahu dhalik, then is this action of saying words of kufr, this action of disrespecting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or disrespecting the sha'air of Islam, all of these remain what? Haram. But because of the extraordinary circumstances, you will not be sinful. So what happens? Rukhsatul fa'il, you are allowed to do the action, but the hurma remains in place. The hurma is intact, it's still haram. Are you following? Does that make sense? Like for example here. So al-ikrahu, being forced, ajra yujri, to utter. To basically mean make the words of kufr flow from your tongue, meaning utter. So we translate it here as utter. To utter the words of kufr on your tongue, bima yakhafu, because of what he is fearing on himself, or because of what he's fearing for any of his body parts. Either he die, or chop his finger off, chop his hands off, stab him. Yes? If you have one of that feeling, you're allowed to say this. بِالشَّرْطِ. What's the condition? أَن يَكُونَ قَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. That his heart is content, his believer. Like what happened to Ammar ibn Yasir? His father was killed, Yasir radiallahu ta'ala anhu. His mother was killed. And then they said, we're not going to kill you, but we're going to make sure you say this. They started torturing him so severely, and he had to say words of kufr. So he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he said, this is what I had to know he was crying. So then the verses were revealed. إِلَّا وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ. He is forced and his heart is at peace with Iman. Do you understand? So now what we say here, so we saying here now, is that this fail is originally haram, it remains haram, but because of circumstances, what are you allowed to do? You're allowed to now do the action, but it still remains haram. Hukmuhu, because it's a haram action. If you were to do sabr, and you say, I don't care, you can kill me, cut my fingers off, stab me, hatta qutila, he made patient until he was killed. لَكَانَ مَأْجُورًا, he'll be rewarded. Why? لِتَعْظِيمِهِ. What's this? It's a mistake here. لِتَعْظِيمِهِ. What's the word we're supposed to be here? لِتَعْظِيمِهِ. What's missing? It's a typo. Yeah, with nahi, not fa, with the nah. لِتَعْظِيمِهِ نَحْيَ الشَّارِعِ. What has he actually done? He has honored and revered the prohibition of the Sharia, so he's done a good thing. And because of this good thing, he's going to be rewarded. Because of the good thing, what will happen? He'll be rewarded. Do you understand? Contrary to this, we have what? مَسْتُبِيحَ مَأَ قِيَامِ السَّبَبِ. مَسْتُبِيحَ مَأَ قِيَامِ السَّبَبِ. What becomes mubah along with the sabab being in place. So it becomes halal because of sabab. Let me give you an example. Like during the day of Ramadan, is eating food halal or haram? Haram. When the azan is given, the ruling of that food changes, isn't it? What does it become now? Halal. If you don't eat that food, what are you now? You're not getting reward for that because the ruling is not halal. Are you following? To cohabit before nikah is haram. If you don't cohabit after nikah, you say, well, you're fulfilling your body's right and your wife's right. The ruling has changed. Now what we're saying here now, there are certain actions like al-ikrah al-akli al-mayta wa shurb al-khamr. When somebody says to you, if you don't eat this dead body, you don't eat this pork, or you don't drink alcohol, what am I going to do to you? I'm going to shoot you. Now at that time, is the azan went. What happens now? The fasting person's food becomes what? Halal or haram? Halal. When a person threatens you, a proper threat, the haram food becomes what to you? Halal. You're extreme hunger. If you don't eat, you're going to die. If you don't eat, what's going to happen? You're going to die. What happens now? What happens now? Huh? It becomes halal. So if you do not eat, you're starving. What happens now? Fi makhmasa. In hunger. So now the ruling of this food is now what? Halal. It's like, for example, to expose your aura, to expose your private parts is what? Haram. Now, in labor, normally you have a midwife, a female. It's what? Fine. Because it permits. Now what? If you don't have somebody expose your private parts, then how are you going to deliver the baby? So now the ruling changes. The ruling is now mubah. بقدرها. Only for as long as needed. Are you following? And then, but along to how much ever you need. So for example, it based on stages. So for example here, you can't say, oh, you know what, we're starving. Let's go and have a nice full cup of wine and enjoy and laugh and drink and eat as much as you want. Only how much what stops what? Your hunger. And which saves you from dying. Alcohol, how much ever alcohol will stop you from that punishment. Similarly in labor, first you have one. What's the akhaf? What's the most lightest one? Have a female. If you've got emergency, left their situation, there's some complications in labor, and a male comes, so only a male doctor is available for this complicated operation. Permissible, because now what? Zarura has increased. Now the ruling has changed to become mubah. If that person dies, then it becomes he's died because he's not really done he's died because of mubah. Are you following? Hukmuhu lawim tana'a an tanawulihi. If he withholds or abstains from consuming that, hatta qutila aw mata. Hatta qutila aw mata. Until he is killed or he dies. He's athiman. Because there's no difference from him not drinking water and drinking a wine. Because it becomes halal now. And as soon as that state goes away of what? That threat goes away, it becomes haram again. This is what suhoor. Suhoor comes about, what happens? And if suhoor, what happens now? The food becomes haram again. Are you following? So the ruling changes. So when you're not threatened, it's haram. You're threatened, comes halal. Threat goes away, comes haram again. So now it's basically now you have to do accordingly. Anyway, chalo. Bismillah. So summarize now. We have the ahkam, we have the ahkam wad'iyya, we have the ahkam taklifiyya. So the ahkam taklifiyya is awamir and nawahi. What do you have? Awamir and nawahi. And in nawahi, what do we have? Azima and rukhsa. Azima means the actual original ruling is farad, is haram. Yes? And the rukhsa is that this ruling has slightly changed because of circumstances. So kalimatul, you have rukhsa haqiqiyya is actually haram, but you're allowed to say these words of kufr because of circumstances. And the other ruling is that the ruling actually changed to become halal. From the original ruling has changed. Yes? So original ruling is you have to cover your aura from your navel to your knees. But you have an operation, you have a sickness, you have an illness, so you can expose that part. You understand? That's now the rukhsa. So that's the end of the book. Yes? So this we did muqaddimah. Muqaddimah, we explain what usul al-fiqh was, we explain the topic of usul al-fiqh, the objective of usul al-fiqh. Then we went through the taqsim, the kitabullah, and not only kitabullah, but how you understand language. We had 4 taqsim. باعتبار الوضعي، باعتبار الاستعمالي، باعتبار الوضوح والخفاء، باعتبار how do you do dalala from that. And then the first 3, how do you get to the bayan of the first 3? You can bayanul تغيير etc. And then sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, you have mutawatir, mashhur, and khabar ahad. And then we had the sharat of khabar wahid. Then you have ijma'. The first is ijma', ijma'u sahaba, ijma'u man ba'd, ijma'u sahaba sukutan or sarahatan. And after that we have qiyas. And then the shuru' of qiyas, the illa, the shartul illa, the types of qiyas, and daf'ul qiyas. And then after that ahkam wad'iyya, ahkam taklifiyya, and ahkam taklifiyya, the awamir and nawahi. And under awamir and nawahi, aziman, rukhsa. So that is the end of our series. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all shortcomings, overlook all shortcomings, any insincerities, any way we not fulfill the right of the book. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the author. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward our teachers who taught us. And may Allah reward all of those who have helped in our education. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a means of goodness and khair and reward for me, for you, and for all of those who listen afterwards. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك.